Okay, I think we're all right.
Am I right?
I think the knee wants to.
Oh, does he?
He's fought me off to do it. I was definitely.
It's probably because there's going to be a big insult, actually.
Is everyone back in their seats, back online? You can see people online, you know, everyone. So, guys, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Grier, Gareth Grier. So, Gareth Grier is not only an expert in pre-hospital emergency medicine and an educator. He was a tutor, mentor, you know, that I've known for the last 11 years. He's known me since registrar days, so it gives me a lot of pride to have him speaking to us today on his experience in simulation, and I have no doubt it'll be of immense help in guiding our education strategy going forward. So good to have you.
Thank you. Lovely introduction. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. I feel like Jeremy Beadle today. All right, coming and embarrassing you. Gareth, I don't know how to thank you for the work you did for the ACCU setting up. So Gareth and team set up the communication. I'm sure you probably all know this. There was just this unbelievable communication that you set up that, you know, all families had an update on a daily basis, and, you know, the end of life visits and etc. that you guys sort of facilitated. Your leadership was immense, and it's really, really appreciated. So I don't know how else to thank you, apart from give you an ACCU bag.
Amazing. Thank you.
There's some whiskey in there. There's a card and a badge and an ACCU mug as well. So we're kind of some tea cakes.
And some tea cakes. All right. This is brilliant. Thank you. It's just what I need.
But listen, thank you very much for being absolutely really fantastic. Kind. Sorry to come and disturb.
I'm still in awe of everything everybody did. You know.
No, we're in awe of you. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'm really, really embarrassed at the start of the talk. So, okay, thanks everyone. A bit about simulation. I think on the programme it was training in general, but we can meander around all of it actually. So half an hour or so on simulation. I just wanted to say to start off with, in the Mutual Appreciation Society, that it's so impressive the way that this service has gone from strength to strength so quickly as well. So well done on all the stuff that's going on. I know many people, for those who don't know me, I spend a bit of time doing HEMS, a bit of time, the least amount of time I can possibly spend in A&E, spend there. And then the rest of my time is in the university and with a thing called the Institute of Pre-Hospital Care. And in fact, this talk about simulation will just come from our master's programme, where we run a module on simulation-based medical education. So I'm interested in all that stuff. So today I thought I'll just do a little bit of history about simulation and how it applies to education. I'm mindful it's a governance day, so we'll do a bit of a kind of quality, how do we prove things work kind of theme as well. A few little offerings from our experiences, and then maybe a little bit about some of the academic opportunities that might be available for the service as it goes from strength to strength. I'm also mindful that I've done very little retrieval. My work has been HEMS and A&E, and so I'm not going to pretend that I'm a retrievalist or anything like that. I'm going to talk about it from my perspective and let you adapt to your thinking. I'll just start off by showing you a video of the sort of simulation that we do in HEMS, just to set the scene. This one's going to be of a child with a severe burn, and just maybe spend a couple of seconds thinking through how you would set that up for the kind of HEMS environment. I know many of you have done lots and lots of simulation work over the years, but I'll just show you how we run it. Basically, what we've got is a child in the back of an ambulance. We've burnt the child, not real child, but mannequin child in the back of an ambulance, where we've burnt the clothes and so on. And you're seeing the simulation from the viewpoint of the parents and from the HEMS doctor through Google Glasses. Remember when we used to use Google Glasses? So let's start the video.
And I'm going to have to mute you for this.
You can mute me, son.
Okay, let's just... I didn't call you, you just bloody turned up. Just go to hospital, please take my baby to the hospital. Just don't, what are they doing? Just get my baby to the hospital.
Okay, relax. 2 minutes, guys.
Yeah, 4.5-year-old now. 50% burns
So
from
my name's
house
Gemma.
fire.
I'm one of the doctors.
Currently she's just a 15. Joe, what's the ETA today?
You're a doctor, do something for my baby. Please just do something for him. He fell against the fire. I didn't know what to do. Please do something for him. Look at him.
First thing I'm going to do.
Oh, Alfie.
Awful lot of wet. Can I just borrow you a second to help?
What I need you to do is get rid of all this clothes and all this cold clothing because he's going to have.
So just have a little think about, first of all, how we go about setting up simulations, and then obviously we're all thinking about what the team could do better. But for the purpose of this, how do we set up the sort of simulation that would be applicable to your world at this point? I'm going to come back to this simulation at the end, because we ran this simulation for years and watched all sorts of things happen, like the parents get arrested for bad behaviour, all sorts of fights outside, that kind of thing. And it was never really clear to us how we nailed the learning from it. And as you can see, we have a lot of fun with simulation. We burn stuff, we dress the mannequins up, all that. But the bottom line is it does have to be a learning experience, doesn't it? And that's actually the really tricky bit. And I don't have to tell you that the world is full of cases where your technical skills and your non-technical skills are in balance. And we're quite lucky in the HEMS system in that most of the people who come to us have already got a lot of technical skills. We might need to tweak them a little bit, but it's the non-technical aspect. It's being in the back of the ambulance in the middle of the night. It's the parents, the families, the dark, all that kind of stuff that really does need quite a lot of focus in our simulation work. So I like this pie chart approach, and now we use the pie chart thing for all of our setting up of simulations, but also for debriefing is pretty useful, because it's very difficult every simulation you do to look at every aspect of every case, because there's so much going on. So compartmentalizing the educational bit can be useful. So for example, on that burn one, there was clearly a focus there on the non-technical, but specifically care of the family was probably the biggest one, less so on the technical aspect of burn management, because the guys doing this have probably got sufficient background on that anyway. So you can play with these pie charts in whichever way you want. You can run the simulation in the same simulation using different distribution in your chart and so on if you want to. We'll come back again to that sim. And just this one doesn't have sound, so I can probably talk over the top of it, I think. This is a real life scenario. Some of you might have seen this on YouTube. Of course, it's East London, so you're probably thinking there's someone being murdered, because that's what happens. But of course it isn't, and remarkably, this is a group of people helping someone, can you believe it, in East London. Somebody under a bus, and this group of people is lifting the bus off the patient. They actually saved the patient's life before anybody got there. The reason I'm putting that in there in the simulation talk is that is I wouldn't say it's a typical scene, but it's not uncommon to have 100 people on your scene. But you can't do your simulation every time you do it with 100 people in a bus and all that kind of stuff. So you have to work out which bits you're going to test and which bits you're going to do in your fully immersive simulation. So fully immersive simulation is very difficult to do because it needs a lot of preparation, a lot of planning, a lot of debriefing, and a lot of people. And that's often what put people off, or put busy people off delivering simulation, because it's a lot of work, a lot of investment and so on. So I don't know from a Nectar point of view what a fully immersive simulation might look like and what elements of drama you'd have in it, what would the technical elements be. You'll think of what all of those things might be, and we base all of our sims, I think it's safe to say, on stuff that's actually happened to people, because then it becomes very credible. We don't really have to invent everything. So have we turned an ambulance over yet? I say yeah, that's terrible, isn't it? But I mean, they turn over, don't they? So I don't know how you're going to do that sim, but that would be a fully immersive kind of situation from them. All right. We've worked quite a lot, I think, with sports people. I haven't got a football player here, but one of our HEMS consultants, some of you will know, Ali Sanders, was an Olympian, so she's put us in touch with lots of people who like to talk about simulation, training, rehearsing and so on. And this is just a bit of fun in this video. It does have sound of Owen Farrell trying to take, you know Owen Farrell, right? He's a reasonably good rugby player. I hate to say it as a Welsh person talking about an English rugby player, but Owen Farrell, reasonably good rugby player, trying to kick a ball. We'll watch how he does it.
First challenge was obviously the girls coming out, stewardesses walked around me and then stood under the post. I was a bit scared of hitting them really. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I missed one, but I'm definitely still putting that down to the kicking on the tarmac, not the girls walking around. Challenge 3 got a bit more difficult. Putting a jet out, obviously putting its engine on and firing out its jet stream was obviously going to be a tough challenge. With the NASCAR coming out and obviously skidding around me and actually driving towards me while I was kicking was a bit nerve-wracking. Fifth and final one was ridiculous really. As far as conditions go, when you're kicking, it doesn't really compare to anything like this. The ball wouldn't stay on the tee, so I needed a bit of help really. And Jamie obviously came out and helped keep the ball on the tee. You know, there has been some tough ones in games, but not like that.
I don't need to explain. I mean, people in this room have got exceptional technical skills, but I think we'll all accept that if you put enough pressure under us, we'll lose our technical skills at some point. So that sort of rehearsal is pretty important. Changing tack a little bit. Does anybody know this lady? Don't worry, it's not a old Royal London story. She's called Madame de Coudray. She's a midwife. And she was around in the 18th century in France, and she developed at least what I can find, as the first ever resuscitation simulator, medical simulator, mobile fanny that she went around with for many years all over France. And basically, she'd identified there was a major problem in obstetrics and delivery, and went all around France for many years and seemed to save lots of lives. And my point of saying that is, the simple mannequins can be really, really effective. So I know you're struggling, you know, everybody struggles for money and is tempting to buy the 50 grand stuff. They're all very good, but actually you can do a lot with some very simple kit. Most of us think that Resusciani was the first one of these, and now you've got all of the snazzy versions of that, but people have been doing a lot of good stuff for many, many, many years. So simulation-based medical education does have an evidence base, but it's not a powerful evidence base. But the important thing is it uses a lot of time, time is expensive. And so we kind of have to be a bit responsible with that. You know, you've got the sim suite here full of really expensive kit. In any other aspect of medicine, we'd be saying, well, can we prove that that actually changes outcomes? Can we prove that that helps the patient? And that's where the tricky bit comes. So is there any evidence for it? Well, there is for simulation-based education in general, but when you come to pre-hospital and retrieval medical education, and certainly in pre-hospital we do a lot of simulation, the evidence base and certainly the cost-effectiveness basis is very poor, actually. But that doesn't mean to say there isn't some hope and some opportunities for us to change things. And just on evidence, I mean, we listen to Chris Whitty and all of that, don't we, talking about COVID vaccine evidence, and those guys are proper specialists in their field trying to get it together. And you're all familiar with how the different stages of those vaccine approvals and all of the proper scientific basis of trying to do those things, so that we, as I was saying, get to a point where the thing that we've spent our money on and our energy in is proven to produce outcomes. I was part of a very important study last night in the vaccine trial. So I'm hoping that the vaccine, the T4 trial, is actually effective. But what about in simulation? And I don't know whether you're familiar with Tim Draycott. Maybe he's a Bristol obstetrician. He's quite famous in the simulation world. They're both very famous, but they've looked at how They apply the same principles of medical evidence to simulation as you would to any other medication or intervention that you do in medicine. And I think this is where some of the opportunities might come for us. What they did in that paper was to look at patients with shoulder dystocia and simulation-based program for educating obstetric registrars in treating shoulder dystocia, and try to link that with outcomes of the babies in terms of incidence of neonatal hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, and showed in their paper, it's a reasonably good paper actually, that fewer of the babies had hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy after the simulation-based training program had come in. So it wasn't a randomized controlled trial, it was a before and after study, but quite a nice one that looked actually does what they were doing, benefiting the patients. And then from the ITU perspective, obviously there's lots of work on central venous catheter infections, clearly very, very important. But again, simulation programs in the sim lab, inserting the catheters, get your first pass rate better, therefore infection rates go down and you improve outcomes for the patients. And they're probably two of the, I would say, seminal papers in our world that are relevant to evidence-based simulation. But I can see how in a Nectar system we could start to bring some of this research into it. So essentially, rather than the 5 stages of the vaccine stuff, they kind of narrowed it down to 3 really. The lab-based sim, and lab-based sim is kind of what goes on here in the haptic suite and all that stuff. To does something improve the practice, so the delivery, the skill, and then ultimately into public health outcomes. And I was just playing with this morning. Again, I'm not a retrievalist, but I was thinking, what would you do in a T1 simulation-based program in Nectar or in retrieval? And I don't know. I mean, you'd do a better list than me, but you know, ambulance ramp failure. If we haven't turned an ambulance over, we've definitely, I'm sure all of us, the ramp has failed. And it can, if you're already teetering on the edge with a really sick patient, push you over the edge and start other balls rolling in failure and then bad outcomes for your patient, can't it? Even something like that. And the thing about these T1, these little T1 simulations, which I'm sure you do anyway, they're quite easy during downtime. You don't need 100 people. You don't need lots of expensive kit. And you can fit them into a program and do them in, because most of us, we have quite a lot of downtime in HEMS. You probably, I don't know, get it in Nectar as well to do that. But the big question is, how does your T1 process then link into your T2 and then subsequently into your T3 patient outcomes? So what for you would be an improved practice measure, a quality measure? I don't know, maybe periods of hypoxia during your retrievals, if you've sorted out your ventilator drills, I don't know, something like that. But that would of course be on your either single patient or groups of patient basis. And then outcomes, and I've seen some of the amazing data that you're already generating. You know, there's outcome data there. Is there a series of things that you can do to then either before and after or compared with other services look at whether your simulation, your training program improves outcomes in terms of, well, survival probably. I don't know, but it's all possible, I think, and relatively, I think it's probably easier in retrieval than it is in pre-hospital actually. So just coming to the end of it all, because we've only got half an hour. I just wanted to say as well that the medicine itself is only really part of what we do. And I think everybody who works in the system probably realizes that there's so much more to it once you get into the back of an ambulance, once you start taking patients from other hospitals and doing handovers and all the rest of it. So we have spent a lot of time over the years, this is very quick, focusing on how do you get everything in the system perfect? How do you drive the cars, not crash your ambulances? If we'd crashed all the HEMS cars in the first, you know, as HEMS was evolving over the years, then the service would be over. So the same level of scrutiny, practice, standards had to be applied to all of that. And then finally, really, and coming back to that simulation in the beginning, again, we all do simulations for a lot of fun, quite enjoyable. We like watching other people screw things up. But if it's about education, then if you think about that scenario we saw in the beginning, maybe you thought it was great. But the problem a lot of people that we educate have is seeing what the best model looks like. And another athlete analogy, you know, is, you know, Jess Ennis, the heptathlete. So she wins Olympic gold in the London 2012 games in a home country. So her coaches talk about how on earth does she go to Rio? What is better than that? The things she'd already done, and unless she could visualize what that would be, it was very difficult to move on. It's an extreme example. But if we are educating people, do they have models in their head, a mental model of what the better thing looks like? What does a brilliant transfer look like in your eyes? I don't know. Okay. So coming back to the burn thing, you saw the video once, and as I said, we went through that scenario for ages, and I'd never really clocked what the better model would look like. And just get, and then this guy came along called Neil, and he was from Scotland, and I'll just show you with the sound on what Neil did in the scenario, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Do I need to mute myself? Something right?
Yep. So Mark, yeah, we are. So what we're going to do is all the things that would happen in a hospital emergency department, we can do right here, right now. Okay? Because we are effectively, all of us working together, a mobile hospital. We can do everything that your son needs right here, right now. Okay? If I move him and do nothing, he's going to get sicker. So we need to do some things to make him better now. Okay? So.
What are you going to do to him?
Okay, so we're going to help him with his breathing and with his pain. Okay, is he allergic to anything?
No, he's fine. He's doing well. He was just running around, and he just tripped and fell into the fire.
So you look at that, to be honest, when we saw it, we were like, bloody hell, this guy is good. You know, he would have passed his comm skill OSCE with me, you know, with flying colours. We're going to take him out of his pain. We're going to help him with his breathing and all that stuff. But the learning thing, and the thing we've shared with all the groups since, is the thing that he did was acknowledge that, and this is true for many of our patients, there's hardly anything we do, in fact, there's probably not anything that we do, where in the first 30 seconds of you arriving on scene, the thing you do to the patient, the technical skill that you do, changes anything. All right, and Neil has clocked that the thing that he needs to do in the first 30 seconds is to get control of the family, the ambulance crew, and everything else, and then it works beautifully. And the great thing about that is you can apply that to any sim. That's nothing to do with burns. You can apply it to any scene. So, you know, even sometimes now where you turn up and there's a thoracotomy to do, right? The team are racing with the scalpel. No, you just need 10 seconds, probably 15 seconds to sort the team bit out, and then it's much smoother. So a lot of the simulation stuff is, yes, using cases, but then getting lessons out of it that people can apply for all of their cases rather than the specifics of what has just been done. So what does better look like is an important little concept. So that was, it wasn't even a summary of everything we could have talked about in simulation, but a little taste probably for us to start thinking about, well, where do we take this? How do we employ it? I think the service is really well placed to do quite a lot of this evidence-based stuff as well. He says, not having to put the work in. But anyway, I don't know whether you got time, questions, or what you want to do. I'm happy to do whatever. Thank you. Go for it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I spoke this morning about where we're at now and where we're going to, and obviously as a developing service, we could spend a lot of time developing stuff, but we sort of thought about, well, I spoke about things that we can do quickly.
Yeah.
In terms of simulation at the moment, the transfer course there, which is run sort of by the anaesthetist, which is a novice course, has 2 sims built into it, including one which is placed in the back of an ambulance. But I know from experience, because my main involvement in doing sim now is actually with the FFRCM OSCE exam.
Yeah.
And within the OSCE team, there are 5 of us that work on the sim station, and that's a 7-minute station to basically tease out a specific learning point as part of the examination.
Yeah. And
within that small team of five consultants, over the course of 12 months, we can probably develop properly 4 good simulations over 7 minutes.
Yeah.
So the time investment is absolutely massive, but that's a core part of the exam. It has to be, and we're now trying to do that over Zoom. So I suppose if I was honest, I would see the threat that we have, as I alluded to this morning, was spending a lot of time trying to develop something.
Yes.
And not actually completing it or getting part way through, as opposed to smaller things.
Yeah.
So in terms of simulation, you've alluded to like mannequins, and what are the small things in the PDSA type cycle that you think we could do early on? Because obviously that immunology shown now is completely overwhelming to me of where we'd go from now to trying to do something like that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's an important question. I'd come back to what I was saying about the little T1 studies, you know, and I don't know what your shifts are like, whether there is downtime or there isn't downtime. I mean, we've talked in HEMS for years, right? Everybody keeps saying every day, oh, we should do a full sim every day. We've never done it. But it's almost like getting the basics done well, isn't it? So are the checklists done in the right way? Do we drill drills about what happens when the oxygen leaks or flows out? Yeah. What about ventilator disconnections, I suppose, those sort of things. And there's almost like a checklist for all of the people in the system of what drills you go through and how often, a bit like the pilots do their line checks and stuff. So that can be done, I think, on shift or along a series of shifts. And then days like this, I suppose, that people are investing time into as well, whether there is a sim. But I would say that we've made the mistake in the past of treating all simulation as a test. So you say to everyone, right, you know, stand out there, there'll be something happening in here and you have to come in and fix it. And that doesn't work for everyone. And it particularly doesn't work for consultants. You know, I was using myself as an example the other day. My weakest thing in A&E is probably pediatric medicine, right? But the way to get the best out of me in learning pediatric medicine is not to put me in a sim with pediatricians watching me and with their clipboards. I'll freak out. I probably won't turn up. I'll find something else to do. So it is about understanding the team as well and how different members of the team will respond to simulation. I guess I'm wittering on now and waffling and probably haven't answered the question.
I took great interest in your initial few slides of the concepts around simulation, even preceding the T1, proving benefit, etc. One of the challenges we have is certainly the simulation I've been involved in the hospital setting of most impact is mirroring adverse events. So your actual sims are based on adverse events, and we're in essence service where the whole concept of retrieval medicine in England, say for MR Scotland, is new. Yeah, sure, there was a network before, and perhaps we can tap into that to build on our own, you know, few hundred cases worth of sort of age of what events we may wish to target. I think the biggest challenge for us actually with a blank canvas is deciding what we wish to simulate to a high fidelity, and this is many years after HEM's conception that this was reached, to be honest. Let's face it, and what we think we can do in less immersive fashion, but more frequently to achieve the repetition element of simulation. And whether we want automated feedback for that, or whether we want devices where we'll provide the feedback, and that will be expense, time, etc. setup. And I think deciding those things will be fundamental to what our regular sim training may look like. And that's the hardest element for us actually, and it may well be that we tap into your knowledge for sort of advisory purposes further actually.
It's interesting to talk about it. I mean, there's always a conflict between rehearsing and practicing common stuff and then the rare events, but the really important rare events. So for us, you know, perimortem cesarean section, right, turns up all the time. Nobody ever really does it in the grand scheme of things. We've done a couple in our service over 40 years, but it probably is important you practice it. For other services, you know, we're going over to Northern Ireland HEMS next month to talk about thoracotomy. They've never done one in their system. So they're working out how do they practice for that rare event and not sacrifice all the other really good things that they have to focus on. So there's some balance between the reality of what actually happens. And then on the incidents, the kind of after action review thing, I know those things are important, but if you look at the way aviation, maritime do it, they are proactive rather than reactive, because you know what happens. There's an adverse event. All of a sudden, we all practice something for a week, and then you forget about it for a year, and then you know, like the bomb in the hospital. Not sure whether I'm allowed to say it or not, but like, we'll now all be practicing for a month for a bomb in the hospital, and then we won't do anything for another 10 years, right? Anyway, All right.
Any comments or questions? I mean, those of you working out the kitchen, please. Yeah.
On the drills, because I think one of the things that we do every day is very basic information on the rate change groups and we'll get them out. If we follow that very straightforward,
Yeah, and of course drills, you can do drills like sitting here at a desk and then escalate it to, you know, if you've got an obese patient in an ambulance, the drill for how to change your infusion is a very different kettle of fish to what you're doing in the classroom. But you might not always have the resources to simulate the obese patient in the back of the ambulance who's rolling around everywhere, you know, so you can do drills in different ways as well.
This is just some drills that we had come up with, some mechanical ones, some medical ones, and hadn't thought about the rollover, but you can put that on there.
Yeah, I mean, again, come back to the aviation, the pilots have, you know, they have this book. So bizarrely they have this, and maybe everybody knows this, but if there's a fire in the helicopter, I mean, it sounds a bit weird, but they go and get the book. You're like, no, put the damn fire out. But one of them gets the book and reads out the thing they're meant to do, their you know, emergency action cards almost, aren't they? And I think a lot of services and systems have that sort of thing, even though it takes quite a lot to get buy-in, because we're people who like to just fix stuff. So drills can be tricky as well. Yeah, it's good. I can't quite read the list.
No, then, you know, but then when you get used to it, you actually appreciate it. And we genuinely went through, I don't know if you do it in London, but if you remember in KSS, we were front seat. So we'd go through this every single, we'd go through this every single day, and then the emotions start to repeat themselves, and then it becomes much more repetitive. And actually, if you're in the service for a few years, you will encounter. So I was in 7 years, sort of, you know, 1.5 full time, and the rest ad hoc. I've had one sort of emergency where we had to do emergency landing. Really, that was, and you know, then you appreciate it. You know, then you appreciate the slickness to which it was done.
I mean, if you look at the evidence for retrieval medicine, internationally, the incident rate for retrievals, adult retrievals, is about 50%.
Okay.
As a concept, it would get stopped in its tracks, because actually everyone's just ignored it. If you break that 50% down, it's anything between 20 to 50%, including intra-hospital, in the hospital. And you can break that down pretty on to thirds into equipment, patient, and communication. And actually, as a starting point, you can take that very easy. And there are a lot of quick, and actually just the presence of this service, if you look at the incident rates that John's recorded, we're nowhere near that. So just the presence of the service and people doing it has already taken some of that low-hanging fruit. And
I guess sometimes it's culture as well, isn't it? It sounds like you've got a good culture of the people wanting to do the right stuff. It reminds me of like the American HEMS helicopter system. The culture of safety in the front is very different to the European models, and hence they have loads of crashes. But it's difficult to describe what culture is. So it's difficult. It might be difficult for you to describe why it is your rates of stuff are better.
Why did it become like that? Is that coincidental? Is that several people coming, having been imported from a HEMS background?
Well, you just don't want to say, look, we're all really good and we're like really exactly. But it might be there's something in your team.
You know, was it a group of people who chose to collaborate? You know, with
why is England doing well in the football? Is it because, I mean, it sounds like they've got a culture that's right, and then somebody will write a book about it. But digging into that, because when it goes wrong, you're in trouble. So picking out the good bits when things are going well is something that is difficult to do.